Hello everyone. So in this video I am going to share with you some the my summarization of the 2026 legislative session. I guess I don't have a life because yeah, I went through just about each and every bill that our legislators had brought forth to them. Um, I want to be clear up front. While we have a super duper, I think South Dakota has probably got the strongest super majority in the country. Um, we by far are not seeing this at the sessions. There's a lot of infighting that is being reported that's going on, and as I will point out, some of these bills that should have passed, um, they didn't get passed. Our legislative body is riddled with what we call rhinos, and at the end, I'm going to name some of the worst ones that we have. Um, Democrats have figured out now that they can't, for the most part, can get elected in the state, so they run as Republicans, and if they get elected, then they vote as Democrats. And if you go through these bills, you will you will see that. Um, there are, I believe, 8 of our folks out there in Pierre that are true to themselves, and they ran as Democrats, and most of them are from the southeastern part of the state, and so they have a good chance of winning their elections. So we had a total of 571 general bills that went before the legislators, and I gave each, again, like I said, I don't I must not have a life because I went and did a quick review of each and every one of them. There was 326 House bills, 122 were signed into law, 31 were pulled by the sponsor, and 171 of those bills were either tabled, deferred to the 41st legislative session, or they just failed. And 2 of them were vetoed by the governor. The ones that I didn't review, there was 28 House commemoration bills. That's basically a bill to honor an individual, a group, or event. I didn't review the 16 House concurrent resolutions. These are measures requiring approval from both the House and the Senate. Doesn't need the governor's signature, and really doesn't carry the force of law. Its purpose is primarily to express the collective will or agreement of both chambers. There were 2 House joint resolutions. These are generally used for short term changes to law. I didn't review those. And there was 1 House resolution which I didn't review as well. There were 245 Senate bills. 119 were signed into law, 19 pulled by the sponsor, and 107 were either tabled, deferred, or failed. I didn't review the commemoration bills. I'm trying to speak real quickly here, and it's not coming out good. There were 8 Senate concurrent resolutions that I didn't review, 8 Senate joint resolutions, and 1 Senate resolution that I did not review. I'm not saying all bills were bad. There were some good ones that got passed, but what I'm going to do with you, if you want to stick with me, is share with you this 65 bills, House bills, 40 Senate bills, and 19 property tax bills. And the property tax bills, I will tell you, um, there's a lot to say about those that caught my attention. You may or may not be surprised at the results of some of these bills. And again, the GOP has an obscene majority in the House and Senate, but the voting sure didn't seem that way. When you go into a bill and see how the voting went, you can tell who those rhinos in our legislature are. All right, so I'm gonna I'm gonna read these bills that I picked out. I'm just gonna read the notes. I may stop and elaborate on some of them, but I want to get through these as quickly as possible for you because I know it can be painful. It was the session was done the end of March. It took me the whole month of April to go through this. It's not fun. It's not fun. Okay, so here we go. HB 1003, amend provisions pertaining to the required criminal background investigation of certain school employees. That overwhelmingly passed, except for two GOP House members that voted against it, Representative Jana Hunt and Representative Tina Mulally. I hope I pronounced that right. Sorry, Tina. That was signed by the governor. But it's interesting that two people voted against that. HB 1004, this was a big one. Authorized the recall of county commissioners. Authorized to recall county commissioners. Didn't even make it out of the House. So I guess our legislators don't want us to be able to recall bad commissioners. Just live with them. Live with them. Got it. Thanks. Appreciate it. HB 1005, provide a sales and use tax exemption for goods and services related to data center operations. What are GOP? What? Our GOP want to do this? Well, thankfully, it didn't even make it out of the House committee. They deferred it. HB 1009, an act to revise the speed limit restriction applicable to the operation of golf carts on certain highways. So they would have liked to allow golf carts on state or county highways where the speed limit was 35 miles per hour or less. I don't see the need for this, but I guess some constituents thought it was important. It didn't make it out of the House. It got voted down. Let's leave the golf carts off the highways. Let's be safe. HB 1010, modify requirements regarding the use of a mobile electronic device while operating a motor vehicle. In other words, your cell phone. No cell phone usage unless you're an emergency responder or if it were for emergencies only. I found this one interesting. Didn't make it out of the House. Voted down 46-21. Personally, I don't touch my phone while I'm driving, but I know there are many out there that just have to use it. HB 1031, revise and repeal provisions related to rape offenses and to increase the penalty therefore. Part of the changes were for anyone committing rape on a victim age 13 or younger, the minimum sentence would be 10 years. Didn't even make it out of the House. They kicked can down the road on this one. I thought that was minimum sentence, 10 years. And they didn't care. HB 1034, increase fees for decals and license plates mailed to motor vehicle owners. So the increase is $2.50 per decal, $2.50 per decal, or set of decals, and $12 per license plate. With mail prices so high, I mean, to ship a package now through the mail is getting more and more ridiculous, and it's getting worse by the year. I guess this isn't a bad thing. It doesn't end up on our backs, the taxpayers. I believe most people go to the courthouses to have it done. I don't know for sure, but anyway, this was signed by the governor. HB 1037, exempt active duty or veterans from paying a resident fishing license. Now, in reality, I don't always agree with these exemptions like this for veterans. As a veteran, it's, why should we get a leg up on the rest of the taxpayers in the country. But that's just my thought. Um, I also think that, we pay enough of our taxes to keep the state game and fish going, and the feds. I, Me personally, I think we should be fishing for free. Since we're already paying our taxes to keep these agencies going. Um, that's just my opinion. Let the out-of-staters pay the fees. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. But this one didn't make it out of the House. It got kicked down the road. HB 1038 allowed the Public Utilities Commission to assess actual cost to data centers that are customers of public utilities. I would prefer that we don't have data centers in this state at all. And President Trump has already come out and said that all data centers must now provide their own utilities to thrive off of instead of tapping into our substations, and suck all the power from there. This was signed by the governor. HB 1050 increased civil penalties for commercial driver violations. Interestingly, this never made it out of the House committee. It got tabled. HB 1056, an act to require that the Department of Social Services submit a federal waiver request to exclude soft drinks from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is what happens when we let government get into our lives. They provide the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs, basically welfare, yet whether you like or dislike soda, the government is telling us what we can and cannot eat. I would think that the parents should make that decision. Where does this end? The USDA, CDC, and FDA get it wrong many times. They got it wrong big time with COVID. And in reality, they really don't care about us. HB 1057 increased the amounts required in a motor vehicle liability policy. This is, again, why is the government getting involved in this? It's our insurance that we pay for. Why does the government have to tell us how much liability insurance we have to have? Thank goodness this one got deferred, didn't get voted on. HB 1063, an act to establish requirements for an act to establish requirements for natural hair braiding provided for compensation. Really? Our state government has to tell us who can and who cannot get their hair braided, and then compensated. This is what they're concerned about. Anyway, this one didn't make it out of the House, thank goodness. HB 1068 authorized the dispensing of ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine under a written protocol developed by a healthcare provider and to provide liability protection thereof. Remember the issues we had during COVID about these two drugs and how the government played a role in keeping them from us, even though they knew that it provided and stamped out this COVID crap. And we're also finding out that ivermectin, along with vitamin D and some other over-the-counter drugs, are now wiping out certain types of cancers. Yet the House didn't pass this. Why? Ask your legislators. I guess they don't want to give citizens options to obtain good health care. HB 1069, an act to establish the lifetime registration of and license fees for certain small trailers. There's many states that allow for you to have a one-time license for your trailers, and that's it. You pay it one time, you're done. In the event, though, if you lose the license plate, then obviously you got to go and pay again. But our our legislators want us to continue to fork over the cash every year for these licenses. This one got deferred. The House didn't want to vote on it. HB 1071, an act to establish a 10-year boat registration for owners of certain boats. Same thing with this one. Instead of every year, let's just do it every 10 years. Nope. Got to get that money. House punted on this one too. HB 1076, an act to revise restrictions on residents with a community safe zone and to declare an emergency. This was a good bill telling sex offenders that they can't reside in an area that's considered a safe zone. Protect the kids. HB 1082, establish parameters for the reimbursement of school districts that provide free or reduced price meals to students. So this is a bill to compensate schools with additional taxpayer money after the feds pay a share already for the schools that hand out free meals. I don't know about you, but when I went to school, the whole time that I went to school, we got that little card and it got punched every time we went to go have a meal. My folks paid for it. We never got free meals, so I don't know. We never got them. That's all I'm gonna say. My question though is this free meal stuff on top of our property taxes that already 77% of our property taxes go to the schools. But this one, it got voted in. HB 1087, an act to prohibit the use of paid petitions circulators. Let's see, is what the title states. Oh, it's basically what the title, what I read for the title. That's what it is. Basically, they're prohibiting someone from being paid to circulate petitions. That one failed in the House. HB 1090, require publication of notices of gubernatorial appointments and reappointments. Transparency, what's wrong with that? I don't see an issue with that. We need more transparency. Anyway, the House kicked this one down the road. HB 1091, require that corrected information be posted at least 24 hours prior to a meeting of a political subdivision. House kicked this one down the road. Can they explain? Can anyone explain to me why notifying the public about this or anything else and transparency with our political officials is so difficult? I don't know why that's such an issue. If you don't have transparency, then that tells me you may be doing something wrong and you don't want anybody to know about it. That's the way I look at it. HB 1094, an act to clarify that consent for the donation. Well, this is a good one. An act to clarify that consent for the donation of ovum or sperm must be explicit. An individual's consent to be an organ donor does not constitute consent for the donation or retrieval of the individual's ovum or sperm unless the individual explicitly consents to the donation or retrieval of ovum or sperm. Guess what happened to this one? The House voted it down. It was close, but they voted it down 35-33. I find this bill very interesting. I mean, yeah, I'll leave it at that. HB 1101, prohibit an insurer from declining or limiting life disability or long-term care insurance policies based solely on an individual status as a living organ donor. That one was signed in by the governor. HB 1103 require the annual withdrawal of groundwater from any groundwater source may not exceed the annual recharge of water to the groundwater source. I'm thinking that could be wrong, that this could pertain to AI data centers since they are going to be sucking up so much water from the aquifer. Voted down in the House. They don't want to put restrictions on it. HB 1112, an act to modify the definition of an electronic smoking device, vaping, I guess. Do we really need legislative a bill to determine this? Anyway, it didn't pass in the House, 50 to 18. HB 1113, an act to establish a manufactured housing down payment assistance program. Why only manufactured housing, I ask. I think our state and federal government need to get out of the business of home loans, grants, or whatever, or any practice that utilizes other taxpayers' money for this. Thank goodness this one failed in the House, 45-21. HB 1114, an act to require that certain mental health information be submitted to and subsequently removed from the National Institute Instant Criminal Background Check System. So if someone is found insane, why would this be stricken from the background investigation checks? I would think that this would be vital information when you're hiring somebody. This would be vital information to know. Anyway, it got kicked down the road by the House. HB 1115, an act to revise a provision related to unauthorized possession of a controlled drug or substance. Says you can't possess a controlled drug or substance unless prescribed. Sounds logical. Nope. House kicked that one down the road. HB 1116, prohibit a video streaming service from transmitting certain advertising during children's programming and provide a penalty therefor. Is a good thing, but then an amendment was instituted that took off the words gender transition, which was in the original bill, and then the bill failed, 43-23. So somebody figured that it's okay to transmit advertising for gender transitions. This isn't South Dakota State Legislature mind. HB 1118, an act to make an appropriation for the design and construction of an addition to the existing swine wing to finish barn at South Dakota State University and to declare an emergency. I have a lot of problems with our taxpayer dollars, with our taxpayer dollars, let me rephrase that, with our taxpayer dollars going to any university or college. When Governor Noem was in office, I believe it was 2024, $357 million taxpayer dollars in 1 year went to our colleges and universities. Are they not supposed to live off of the tuition that they charge and the donations that they receive? That's what I thought. Why am I sending my money to an institution that my child has never gone to or will never go to? If they can't survive off of the tuition and donations, then as far as I'm concerned, they can shut the doors. HB 1123, an act to establish a pilot program to provide benefits for menstrual hygiene products and diapers for individuals who receive temporary assistance for needy families and to make an appropriation therefore. Really? More social services programs that take taxpayer dollars. Um, the reason why I have a problem with this is it is well known that many social services programs that are given taxpayer dollars are riddled with fraud, waste, and abuse. This one, thank goodness, got kicked down the road. HB 1124, an act to establish the crime of trespass upon a place of worship, provide a penalty, therefore, and declare an emergency. The bill reads, no person may enter or remain on the premises of any place of worship or within 1,000 feet of any place of worship with the intent to disrupt worship services at the place of worship, menace or harass congregants or employees of the place of worship, or for the purpose of political intimidation of or in the incitement of fear of violence in those attending the place of worship. A violation of this section is a Class 5 felony. So you may or may not remember there was an episode in Minnesota. The ex-CNN reporter, Don Lemon, recorded the whole thing, where about 19, I believe it was 19 people, went into a church in Minnesota during their services and interrupted them so badly that they had to end the services. Well, our house said that's okay. You can go in and interrupt them. They voted against this bill. HB 1129, provide for the carrying of a concealed pistol by certain school district employees. Yeah, our legislators didn't want that one, so they kicked that one down the road. HB 1130, let me go back to it. So I'm hoping, I know some schools are locking the doors. I'm hoping that all schools are locking the doors. And, with all of these school shootings that we have got going on, I guess it could be debated whether a teacher should carry a weapon or not. I'll leave it at that. HB 1133, an act to remove an enhanced permit as a condition of carrying a concealed pistol while on the campus of a public institution of higher education. Yeah, they didn't like this one either. They kicked the can down on that one. Kicked the can down the road on this one. HB 1134, 1135, and 1136, make an appropriation for the development of South Dakota, all the same thing, basically just worded differently. Make an appropriation for the development of South Dakota. The bill had nothing in it. That's it. That's what the bill said. Doesn't explain, doesn't specify, didn't do anything. And all three of them were tabled. HB 1137, an act to make an appropriation for the design and construction of an athletic facility at the University of South Dakota and to declare an emergency. Again, I don't understand why the taxpayers are having to fund this. But this one was signed by the governor. HB 1138, an act, and let me just say, we're not talking hundreds of dollars here. We're talking millions of dollars. HB 1138, an act to require the license of non-medical home care agencies and to provide a penalty therefore. Interesting turn of events on this one. Lots of controversy apparently. It was going to be deferred, but then got recalled, then amended. It barely passed in the House and the Senate. The governor vetoed it, but the veto was recalled. I read the antiquated bill, but not sure why so much attention on this one. If interested, I'd suggest asking your senator or representative about it. Yeah, that one went around the horn quite a bit. HB 1141 provide an additional means of determining the purchase price of a used motor vehicle acquired by gift or other transfer. Really? You know, politicians have to find some way to tax us for everything, don't they? If I'm getting a vehicle as a gift, it should be nobody's business but the person that gave it to me and myself. Anyway, thank goodness this one got shot down. HB 1151 banned kratom and kratom products and to provide a penalty therefore. So I had to look up what kratom was. I had never heard of it. It is basically a form of an opioid, which is highly addictive, and it's really bad for a person. But for some reason, 39 representatives don't want this banned. Didn't make it out of the House. Interesting. HB 1153, an act to protect certain rights of healthcare providers. If I read the bill correctly, it protects healthcare providers from scrutiny if it comes to a provider that doesn't want to participate in or pay for a medical service if it violates their religious beliefs or conscience. In other words, if the healthcare provider is instructed to do something that they don't believe is good in their conscience or religious belief, they would be protected. Nope. 41 members of the House couldn't have that. They voted against it. HB 1155, permit the state to invest in Bitcoin. As far as I'm concerned, in my opinion, Bitcoin is BS. Bitcoin is a fictitious online money scheme. You can't buy anything with it, from what I understand. So why this came up, I don't know. But it's good that the state, I prefer that the state stay out of this crap. Anyway, it got deferred in the House. HB 1160, repeal the Medical Marijuana Oversight Committee. This barely passed in the House but died in the Senate. So why get rid of a committee? Why would you want to get rid of a committee that oversees medical marijuana? I know there are some in Pierre that would love to pass recreational marijuana, but it is what it is, I guess. Of course, we had some of the same rhinos that voted for it. It got shut down. HB 1161, an act to amend provisions related to changing rooms, sleeping quarters, and restrooms. We have those wackos out there that are gender confused, so this should set the record straight as far as marking these areas and who can be in them. That got signed by the governor. Why we have to do that, we will never fully understand. But I guess it's for the lunatics out there. HB 1167 revised a provision related to loitering within a community safety zone. No person who is required to register as a sex offender, as defined in this bill, may enter within a community safe zone or a public library, including for the purpose of observing or contacting a minor related to or in the care and custody of the person. This must not have been important enough to the House Committee because they didn't vote on it. HB 1171, an act to establish provisions related to the disclosure of COVID-19 and mRNA vaccination status and blood donations. Okay, so this one basically is saying if somebody got the COVID vaccine and the boosters and you're going in for a blood transfusion, you should have the right to know whether this blood is coming from somebody that had these vaccinations. It seems logical to me because, as we know, a lot of these vaccines, or a lot of the vaccine and the boosters, have been hurting and killing people. And why would you want it transmitted into your body? But the House doesn't care. They voted it down. Oh, here's a good one. HB 1184, define man and woman throughout the state. The governor did sign it. They in the bill defined what a man and a woman was. They didn't go into the particular genital area, but again, why are we having to go down this road? But surprisingly, in the House, we had Representative Endera, Uri Bulk, Healy, Muki, or Mucky, DeGroot, Emery, Cole, Stevens, and Whitman that voted against this. In the Senate, we had Foster, Larson, Reed, Smith that voted against this. So they don't want to define, these individuals, these representatives do not want to define the difference between a man and a woman. This is what went on in our legislative session in Pierre. HB 1187, an act to add coaches to the list of mandatory reporters of child abuse or neglect. Good one. Overwhelmingly passed and signed by the governor. HB 1209, require employment verification eligibility through the E-Verify program and to provide a penalty therefor. E-Verify, not sure if you're aware of that. Basically boils down to keeping illegals out of the workforce. Failed in the House. I guess they don't mind illegals working in the state, it appears. We have over 9,000 illegals in the state. Obviously, it's okay. HB 1210, an act to prohibit COVID-19 vaccination requirements and to provide a penalty therefor. Remember the horror story of people getting fired because they didn't take the clot shot? 35 members of the House voted it down. They basically said, you don't have a choice. If an employer says you've got to take this damn shot, even though you may die because of it, you got to take it. HB 1212, an act to revise provisions in order to strengthen protections for unborn children. I'm going to read that again. An act to revise provisions in order to strengthen protections for unborn children. In other words, abortion and other things related to that. Now, I thought the governor Nome signed something into law stating that it was against the law to have an abortion in this state. I don't know why they have this bill again, but anyway, the House kicked the can down the road on it. HB 1215, an act to authorize counties and municipalities to issue a license for a cigar bar. Now, this is some really important shit here, right? We can't protect the unborn, but we'll issue licenses for cigar bars. That was signed by the governor. HB 1217, limit the use of taxpayer funds and resources by a public education employer to support a labor organization or affiliate and to provide penalty therefor. Nope, can't have this. Nope. That would save taxpayers money. Voted it down. HB 1224, protect persons from discrimination by financial institutions. Seems logical. Nope. Nope. House doesn't feel like protecting the citizens of the state when it comes to this. They voted that one down. They didn't even vote it down. They just deferred it. HB 1227 increased the annual fee required of an owner of an electric motor vehicle. Now this one I can agree with. Keep Teslas out of South Dakota. You know what? I didn't put down how this one got voted on. I believe it did make it to the governor's desk. HB 1228 require the display of the state motto in public schools and provide for associated legal representation. The state motto, under God the people rule, pretty straightforward, has nothing to do with the separation of church and state, but the rhinos in the House rejected it. Can't have the state flag in the schools, or the state motto, excuse me. HB 1246 prohibit non-disclosure of certain agreements related to data centers. This one failed in the House. Barely. 37 to 30, but it failed. HB 1247 now amend the definition of an abortion. So I go back to that other bill that was talking about unborn child. Maybe they turned that one down because this one was brought up for voting. Anyway, this one did pass. HB 1248 require that a property tax bill provide access to a state website providing property tax information. That's a good bill. It got passed, surprisingly. HB 1265, an act to establish an avian special purpose salvage permit. Anyone trying to salvage non-migratory bird eggs has to have a permit. I guess this must be pretty important. Governor signed it. HB 1269 require that manufacturers of agricultural equipment allow an independent repair provider or an owner to make certain repairs to agricultural equipment. As you may or may not know, a lot of our farmers are having issues with John Deere equipment because John Deere is not allowing people to work on their tractors, whether it be themselves or a mechanic. John Deere dealerships are the only ones that can work on them. Yeah, this one got voted. It got deferred. HB 1274 prohibit the dispensing, distribution, sale, or advertisement of certain articles or things for purposes of an unlawful abortion and provide a criminal and civil penalty therefore. Can you believe that there were some that voted against this? Again, in the House, you had Uri Bulk, Healy, Muckey, Emery, Whitman. Every one of them was a Democrat. In the Senate, Larson Smith, two more Democrats that voted against this. What I don't understand what it is with these people that think it's okay to kill our future generation. At least 66 million babies have been aborted in this country since the 1970s. And they still want to continue to do that. HB 1281, reduce the sales and use tax rates on food to increase the rates for certain taxes, use taxes, and excise taxes, and to provide a new fund for school district capital outlay projects. This bill was introduced by 6 Democrats. Now one may think, yes, let's get rid of sales tax on food, and this bill does accept for cannabis, alcohol, cigarettes, and some other things. Tax on those. but then they impose or raise taxes on everything else. Anything you can think of that can be taxed would be taxed in this bill. They impose more taxes, and then they wanted to start a general fund for these extra taxes to go into a school building construction fund. Really? So what the hell is our property taxes for? 77% of our property taxes go to school, but yet they wanted to generate another tax for additional money to go to the schools. This one, thank goodness, got shot down. HB 1314, an act to modify provisions pertaining to the testing and use of automatic tabulating equipment. Nope, can't do that. Can't make our election integrity any better. House kicked this one down the road. Any issue in this state dealing with election integrity, our politicians, all the way down to the county and city level, do not want to hear about it. They do not want to hear about it. HB 1315, an act to authorize the recall of certain elected officials or individuals appointed to fill vacancies in certain offices. They do not want us, we the people, to have the power to recall idiots in the state. They're basically saying, we don't care if they're terrible or they break the law or whatever the case may, we don't care. You're just going to have to put up with them and vote them out when their term is up. House killed that bill. HB 1324, abolish the state board of elections. The board of elections is worthless. They are worthless. They under this Secretary of State, they've done nothing but try to mess with election integrity in the state. But the House committee decided to keep them around. They deferred that bill. Let's see. House. I did look at one House Joint Resolution 5001, proposing and submitting to the voters at the next general election an amendment to the Constitution of the state of South Dakota requiring a declaration of necessity and clarifying public use of private property taken or damaged by eminent domain. In other words, no eminent domain. This has to do with the Summit Carbon Pipeline. Nope, failed in the Senate. Then there was another House Joint Resolution 5002 proposing and submitting to the voters at the next general election amendment to the Constitution of the state of South Dakota, repealing the requirement to provide expanded Medicaid. Failed in the House. Basically, I mean, it's very clear that our representatives do not want the voters to vote on anything of importance. So basically, the state is saying, and Medicaid, I'll just say, Medicaid is another one of those programs that is riddled with fraud, waste, and abuse. And so basically, this bill, this joint resolution, was for the voters to decide whether the state should expand Medicaid, which is a popular thing going throughout the country right now, in many states. But our representative said, no, you, the voter, don't get that opportunity. Don't understand. Excuse me. All right, so that's the end of the House bills. Thank goodness. Now we'll move on to the Senate bills. Senate Bill 3, an act to limit the types of residential improvements for which counties, municipalities, and townships may require a permit. Basically, they added simple stuff like a door, downspout, gutter, siding, windows. This did get passed, but this permitting BS is out of hand. To me, it's getting out of hand. They're basically telling, I mean, you buy a house, you have property, but apparently it's not your house and your property. We have the government that's telling us what we can do with our houses or what we cannot do. Um, as long as as long as we own the property and there's no and you're not associated with an HOA, or the improvement doesn't affect the property values of the neighbors, then I don't understand why we need to have any permits at all. It's your property. It's our property. The government needs to frickin' leave us alone. Um, SB 4, an act to revise procedures for returning and withholding security deposits for residential premises. Governor signed it. So basically, they changed the time frame from 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So basically, they told the landlords that you can hold on to a security deposit 1 week longer. Really? Why? When you go and rent a property, do you not give your security deposit immediately when you secure that rental? Now, granted, the landlords can go in and have to go in and check the property to make sure that it wasn't destroyed, but they can do that in a day. And now we're giving landlords an extra week to give back your deposit. HB 17, prohibit a candidate or political committee from accepting contributions or loans made by a foreign national. That's a good bill. Like that one. That was signed by the governor. SB 20, make an appropriation for tax refunds for elderly persons and persons with a disability. Good bill. That one was signed by the governor. SB 21 was a similar bill involving property taxes and elderly persons. That was passed as well. SB 40, an act to revise the compliance requirements for limitations on foreign ownership of agricultural land, excluding a prohibited entity, which they don't list. A foreign entity or government can't own more than 160 acres of agricultural land in the state. Personally, I don't think they should own any land at all. But this was passed and signed by the governor. And Governor Noem, went on the websites, social media sites, and she signed a bill saying that China, Russia, Venezuela, a whole bunch of countries were exempt from purchasing land in the state. Good thing. Great. But the bill didn't say that they couldn't lease the land. Yeah, there was a loophole in that bill. So, this one, though, got signed by the governor. SB 47, an act to revise the requirements for executive sessions and closed meetings. Not too much change there, other than a little bit of wording. That one was signed by the governor. SB 59, require the use of certain geographic terminology in official materials of state agency. I found this one very interesting as to why it's even needed. Number one, in this bill it says, number one, may use only the term Judea and Samaria, Judea or Samaria, to refer to land adjacent to Jordan that was obtained by Israel during the 1967 Six-Day War. And number two, may not use the term West Bank to refer to the land. Why in the Sam hell would this even be a bill? Anyway, it got deferred. SB 66. Here we go. Prohibit the use of automatic tabulating equipment and electronic ballot marking systems. For 5 years now, we have been trying to convince our political officials that the tabulating equipment is BS. It's outdated. It's unsecure. It's being hacked. Venezuela, Maduro, other countries are have provided the software for this tabulating equipment, these machines, and yet our political officials just can't get it through their heads, and they continue to allow us to use these machines. Anyway, it died in the Senate. SB 76, an act to transfer monies from the Housing Infrastructure Fund to the Evolving Economic Development and Initiative Fund, and to authorize loans from the Revolving Economic Development and Initiative Fund for airport infrastructure. Speaker of the House Hansen had a bill asking for this money to be given to the citizens for property tax relief. In fact, he is campaigning on that idea. Anyway, it was denied, yet we're giving $15 million in another bill. We're giving $15 million, 0% interest loans to those two airports, Rapid City and Sioux Falls. That's our money, and it's going to be gone for at least 20 years. And they're not having to pay any interest on it. For 20 years, our money's gone. What do we get out of it? SB 79, an act to make an appropriation to the South Dakota Board of Technical Education to construct an advanced manufacturing laboratory space and classrooms on the campus of Southeast Technical College and to declare an emergency. Signed by the governor. Again, money to our colleges. SB 83, require that any holder of a commercial driver's license in this state must be proficient in the English language and to provide a penalty therefore. Okay. This one failed in the Senate committee. Apparently some Senate members think it's okay to have illegals driving commercial vehicles in the state. SB 85, an act to require an election for an excise tax levy of a school district. This was to bring this tax levy to a vote of the electors to opt out if they so desired. Failed in the House. Again, can't let the voters decide. SB 88, clarify the procedure for a potential condemner to examine real property absent the property owner's permission. Basically, this is for eminent domain. Anyone that is not given permission by a property owner to come on a property for an examination of the property has to go through the Public Utilities Commission and follow guidelines prior to the examination. Thank goodness this one was signed by the governor. SB 91, an act to clarify the procedure for petitioning a board of county commissioners for a change to the comprehensive plan or zoning ordinances. The county commissioners have to act on this petition, basically. This is a good bill. If the citizens petition the Board of County Commissioners, the comprehensive plan, I can tell you from McPherson County, is outdated. Our state's attorney, before it was reviewed, just went ahead and changed the date on the comprehensive plan and said, okay, we're good to go. Yeah. Anyway, signed by the governor. SB 92, an act to clarify the rights to appeal and refer certain decisions of boards of county commissioners. This was passed in the Senate, and it got kicked down in the House. Again, they do not want the voters to have any say in what goes on. SB 102, an act to modify the distribution of gaming revenues. Breaking down the percentage distribution from gaming revenues, schools would get 10%. Okay. Why not adjust property taxes to reflect that 10%? This bill got shot down, but um, here we go again. We're giving more taxpayer, this it's gaming revenue, so it's not necessarily taxpayer, but it's additional money to the schools. Um, SB 107, add licensed and registered child care programs to the definition of community safety zone, primarily for the sake of pedophiles or sex predators. Good bill, signed by the governor. SB 108, require that all recorded votes of a legislator be displayed on the Legislative Research Council website. Yeah, why not? Let's have some transparency. Nope. No, no transparency. Senate deferred this one. SB 116, make an appropriation for the design and construction of an indoor athletics facility at Dakota State University and to declare an emergency. Again, more money going to colleges and universities, and it was signed by the governor. SB 117, make an appropriation for the design and construction of a new soccer venue at South Dakota State University. Again, more money to the colleges and universities. Signed by the governor. SB 127, an act to limit nuisances caused by data centers. Yeah, I'm all for that. Get rid of any nuisances, right? Nope. Senate said, no, we're not going to vote on this one. Ain't happening. SB 128, an act to update provisions related to certain large use customers of utilities. This was going to basically put some restrictions on data centers to include water usage. Nope, can't do that either. Our legislators some of them sure love those data centers. Senate didn't, we ain't gonna deal with this one. SB 135, an act to protect residents from increased utility costs and utility shortages caused by data centers and clarify authority to regulate data centers. This one, surprisingly, got voted in by the governor. SB 159, an act to revise requirements pertaining to the minimum age for marriage. Wow. If you want to get married in South Dakota, you have to be at least 18 years old. Unless if you're 16 years old, you can get married, but you either need a circuit court's blessings, or you have to get the parents from both individuals to submit a written consent, and then you're good to go. The other nuance to that is that the two that want to get married cannot be more than 10 years apart in age. Interesting. I found that one interesting. But that one got signed by the governor. SB 164, an act to require that any holder of a commercial driver's license in this state must be proficient in the English language and to provide a penalty therefore. So this one I had told you about another bill that they shot down regarding commercial driver's licenses and stuff. This one did get signed in by the governor, but they're leaving the determination of how much the driver, how much English they can or cannot speak. They're leaving that up to law enforcement during a pullover for them to decide. SB 166, an act to require boards of county commissioners and county planning and zoning commissions to hold meetings after certain times or provide recordings of meetings to the public for later viewing. This was to make sure they didn't hold meetings before 6 p.m. and that the meetings would be recorded. Transparency. Again, transparency. Nope. The Senate deferred it. Can't have transparency. SB 172, enhance the economy of South Dakota. That's it. That was the bill. Enhance the economy of South Dakota. No specification again, no methods, nothing. It was, of course, tabled. SB 175, an act to require that an individual provide proof of citizenship when registering to vote using the voter registration form prescribed by the State Board of Elections. Excuse me. This is a good bill. This law was signed by the governor. But I can tell you as of now that auditors and the Secretary of State are scrambling on how to take care of this. SB 176, an act to amend the period of time before which ballots and other election materials may be destroyed following an election. For a non-federal election, it used to be 60 days, and now it has been changed to 22 months, signed by the governor. Hold on with me, folks. I'm almost done. SB 190, an act to provide for the rights of a parent. You know, it's a sad day when we have to have a law, another law, or specify a law as to what rights a parent has when it refers to how they are legally responsible for their children growing up or helping them to grow up. Anyway, it was signed by the governor. Thank goodness. SB 194, an act to limit the potency of cannabis products sold at medical cannabis dispensaries. In other words, we don't want the bad crap out there in the cannabis. And there was I didn't list them all. There were at least another handful of bills regarding cannabis. This one was deferred. I'm surprised that the Pot Users Club hasn't tried this year to get another recreational dope bill or petition on the ballot this year. But anyway, no. Wide open for all the smokers out there, users of cannabis. Doesn't matter how potent the shit is, you just go for it. SB 198, restrict the use of a cell phone by a student during the school day. Good bill. Hey, when you're being taught, put the cell phones away. The bill got amended, and then it failed in the House. And I believe Dusty Johnson has one of his first commercials he was running was about keeping cell phones out of the schools. Not like he would, but just food for thought. SB 210, provide that a portion of the revenues from wind farms remain with school districts. Here we go again. So this bill got deferred, but let's just say that let's just say this got passed. Exactly. I mean, if it got passed, it got deferred, but let's just say what would happen if it got passed. So this additionally, or exactly, how much more money? I mean, this shakes me up. If you've not noticed, exactly how much more money are we expected to give to our schools? And again, I ask the question: if you're going to give gaming revenues to the schools, are you going to give us relief in property taxes? If you're going to give portion of revenues from wind farms to the schools, would you give us relief in property taxes? I doubt it. Anyway, this one got deferred. SB 218, provide for the establishment of charter schools. I didn't read the whole bill on this. It's multiple pages. But I find it odd for counties to allow AI data centers to be built, but not charter schools. Yeah, this one failed in the Senate. SB 221, an act to establish requirements for the distribution and sale of vapor products and to provide a penalty therefore. Signed by the governor. Interesting. So in SB 194, they voted against regulating the potency of pot that is being sold. But here, our state legislators want to regulate the sale of vaping products and cigarettes. And also, are you aware that South Dakota is one of the highest tax states for the sale of tobacco? I believe it's $1.54 per pack, state tax, one of the highest in the country. Anyway, SB 222, an act to make an appropriation for eligible water, wastewater, stormwater, and non-point source projects, and to declare an emergency. So Section 1 of this says there's an appropriated $10 million from the general fund to the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources for the purpose of providing grants for eligible water, wastewater, stormwater, and non-point source projects in accordance with the guidance provided in Section 2 of this Act. Section 2 says to be eligible for funding, projects must go through the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources by the way of Board of Water and Natural Resources and be included in the state water plan. The following funding terms apply to projects under this act. In my opinion, this is one example of why South Dakota is a welfare state. We rely on government's funding to help us out with these projects. And when they do that, when the government helps us with these projects, whether it be a grant, loan, whatever the case may be, the government sets the rules. It tells the state, here's your money, but these are the rules for you to get this money. Anyway, this bill, you know what? I don't know how this one went. I believe this one got shot down. I didn't mark that. SB 223. I will let you look that one up. An act to modify the requirements for a petition to refer an excess tax levy of a school district to a vote. In other words, if the schools want to impose a tax levy, then it needs to be voted on by the taxpayers. Sounds logical. But here we go again. Our legislators do not want the people to vote on anything except to vote for them. This failed in the House. SB 229, an act to require an election to approve the issuance of capital outlay certificates. If a school district may issue capital outlay certificates to acquire or construct real property, plant, or equipment, this needs to be voted on by the taxpayers. Hey, guess where this one went? Yeah, it got shot down. Yeah, voters aren't going to get it. SB 232, an act to impose a one-year moratorium on the construction or expansion of hyperscale data centers. Do I need to tell you how this vote went? Data centers. All the other bills with data centers. Yeah. Nope, got shot down in the Senate. You guessed it. SB 235, an act to protect residents from increased utility costs and utility shortages caused by data centers, to clarify authority to regulate data centers and to modify provisions pertaining to the purchasing of goods and services by a data center. The bill failed. I wouldn't have had to tell you that. You would have already known. Our legislators that support this data centers, they don't give one crap about the constituents. Okay, so that's the end of the Senate bills. If you're still awake and you're still with me, I applaud you. But now I want to go through. What I did is I broke out some property tax bills. We've heard a lot of campaigning about property taxes. We've heard a lot from our legislators about property taxes. And so these are the property tax bills. and you decide on where their thought process is. So, HB 1036, an act to limit annual valuation increases on owner occupied single family and non agricultural properties. Increase couldn't be more than 3% annually, and must be assessed at fair market value. Yep, bill was tabled. HB 1307, an act to limit the annual increase in assessed value of each owner occupied single family dwelling. Again, and this is similar to HB 1036. Increase couldn't be more than 3% annually and must be assessed at fair market value. Again, tabled in the House. HB 1051, an act to revise property tax levies for school districts and to revise the state aid to general formula and the special education formula. This was signed by the governor. Okay, I hope I don't lose you here. So what they did was this. Number one, maximum tax levy went from $5 maximum tax this is how bills are written. Maximum tax levy went from $5.20 to $4.87 per $1,000 of taxable valuation. Did I lose you there? Because I lost me. I lost myself. Number two, maximum levy for owner occupied went from $2.51 and $2.51 to $2.35 per thousand. But then if you go down in the bill, it basically comes to this. Allocation for student with level 1 disability went from $7,650.45 to $7,874. Your taxes went up. Allocation for student with level 2 disability went from $16,759.91 to $15,957. Taxes went down a little. Allocation for student with level 3 disability went from $23,139.68 to $21,045. Taxes went down a little. Allocation for student with level 4 disability went from $18,053.89 to $18,029. Allocation for student with level 5 disability went from $37,039.28 to $38,058. And finally, allocation for student with level 6 disability. I didn't know there was that many levels of disability, to tell you the truth. Went from $11,838.15 to $12,207. Are they really saving us any money? I got the deer in the headlight look when I read through this bill. I seriously read through this whole bill, and it made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, other than the fact that they're playing games with the numbers. Really incredible. HB 1168, an act to provide a property tax credit for certain educational expenses. Nope. Can't. No. House deferred it. HB 1193, an act to require that a county provide a refund of taxes to disabled veterans and surviving spouses under certain property tax relief programs. Good thing, right? But there is a stipulation. Stipulation is that it's only $200,000 worth of the value of the home. Good or bad? I'll let you decide. HB 1241, modify the requirements for public notice of a hearing prior to a vote to impose an excess tax levy and to modify requirements to refer an excess tax levy of a school district to a vote. Basically, this is if the school wants more money, the citizens, and I had read you another bill about this, different variation, the citizens should be able to vote on this. No, no. The Senate shot it down. You are, as a property tax owner, are not going to have a say whatsoever where your property taxes are going. HB 1260 authorized the establishment of municipal property tax rebate programs. Municipalities have to create an ordinance and set criteria for property owners to be able to apply for tax rebates from municipalities only. This was signed by the governor, surprisingly. HB 1261, provide a tax credit for owner-occupied property to make an appropriation, therefore, and to transfer monies to the general fund. This was a plan by Representative Hansen to take $60 million from the Housing Infrastructure Fund and add it to the general fund and give it to give it for property tax relief. Is basically what it was. This is something that he's been campaigning on. The House tabled it. The bill was amended by Nostrup, representative out of Brown County, and he amended it to read $101 instead of $60 million. He amended it to read $101. Well, of course, that got shot down after he amended it. HB 1308, reduce certain property taxes for owner-occupied property and to increase the rates for certain gross receipts taxes and use taxes. Basically, reduce property taxes a tad, but at the same time, the bill raises taxes in other areas. That one got shot down. SB 97, an act to adjust a limit on the percentage increase in revenue payable from property taxes. This bill failed because it basically raised the minimum tax revenue increase on property taxes from 3% to 5%. So increase of taxes basically. SB 99, an act to create the property tax local effort replacement fund to reduce certain property taxes and to increase the rates for certain gross receipts taxes and use taxes. Bill to raise sales taxes through certain businesses, again, to offset property taxes. That one got shot down. It's almost like these property tax bills are painful, extremely painful to our legislators, and they're looking at ways to rob Peter to pay Paul, and then rob Paul on top of it. Wow. SB 212, established a homeowner tax reduction fund. Yeah, they didn't like this one either. Nope. They shot it down. SB 118, an act to deposit certain tax revenues into a homeowner tax reduction fund, was basically to provide a property tax rebate. No. That one failed. SB 125, an act to establish the homeowner tax. These are all property tax bills that went in front of our legislators this session. An act to establish the homeowner tax reduction fund to provide a tax rebate for owner-occupied property. Well, one of our representatives, Idiot Dybert. Anybody that knows Idiot Dybert votes constantly against the citizens of the state. He went in and amended the bill, basically removing the part about sending the property owner a rebate. Really? So the gist of the bill was to provide a tax rebate, and so Dybert goes in and removes that part. And of course, guess what happened? They didn't vote on it. It got shot down. SB 126 increased the amount of value exempt from property taxes under a tax relief program for disabled veterans and surviving spouses. This was going to raise the amount of the value exempt from $250,000 to $350,000. Nope. No. We can't do that. Not going to happen. SB 144, an act to provide property tax relief to certain senior owners of owner-occupied single-family dwellings. Basically, this was to put it in a property tax assessment freeze on any property owner for any property owner over the age of 65. No. Screw the senior citizens of the state. No, we're not going to help you out. SB 183, modify requirements for public notice of a hearing prior to a vote to impose an excess tax levy. Set standards for the schools to advertise a proposed tax levy and give the public time to respond. Again, they don't want the citizens to respond or vote on anything that would keep them from being taxed. SB 199. Establish a new fund to provide property tax relief. Do I need to tell you how this one got voted on? No, I'm not going to. You know. So that's it of the property tax bills. That's a lot of property tax bills. They got shot down, people. A lot of property tax bills, all to deal with property tax relief. So what did our esteemed legislators come up with at the end of the day for property tax relief? This is what they decided on. You can't vote against property tax levies, and we're not going to vote to give you a rebate on your property taxes. We're not going to vote on lowering your property taxes. No. This is what they came up with. SB 96. Authorize the imposition of a county option gross receipts tax to reduce owner-occupied property taxes. So basically, the legislators kicked the can down the road in the direction of the county commissioners and said, here you go. And this was signed by the governor. Here you go, county commissioners. Have at it. Raise, if you want to, raise your county's sales tax by 0.5%. And then take that money. Take that money. I just thought of something I'll tell you. Take that money and put it into a property tax relief fund for the property tax owners to pay the property taxes. If you vote, if the governors or if the county commissioners vote for this sales tax, 0.5%, they have to create an ordinance for it. And that ordinance, and here's the fun part, that ordinance has to be voted on by the people of the county. Would that happen? I don't know. Would our county commissioners follow the same suit as our state legislators as far as allowing people to vote on their taxes and the theft of them? I don't know. So enough on that. I get a little. You may have seen I got a little antiquated or excited about that. But when it came to property tax relief, all of this hoopla about how much they were going to give property tax relief or wanted to, and it basically turned into nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Other than the fact that you're going to pay extra sales tax to pay for your property tax. Right? A tax to pay for a tax. Pretty slick, aren't they? At the very end of the legislative session, the legislators didn't want to hang around. 500 and some bills to vote on. They got, after 38 days, I think it was, they got tired of it. And so they just voted on and passed HB 1326, which is the state budget. If they didn't vote on it, they would have had to hang around a little bit longer, and they didn't want to do that. They wanted to pack their bags and go home. So with that said, they raised the state budget by $80 million this year and added 26 jobs to the state. Mind you, we are a welfare state with at least 66% of the budget coming from the federal government, and yet our legislators keep on spending millions, as I pointed out, millions to the colleges and universities. Screw the property tax owners. Let's give money to the colleges so they can build whatever the hell they want to build. With this spending, as I pointed out before, the federal government gives you money, and when they give you money, there's stipulations with that money. You either spend it the way we tell you to spend it, or you don't get it. And so our legislators like, oh no, we'll take the money and we'll spend it just the way you tell us to do it. This is why we have to get the government off our back, because we're being held hostage by by the spending in these programs. I will say some of the when I'm going through, I already knew this, but when I went through the bills, some of the biggest rhinos we have in the state, I'm going to name them by name, in the state legislature, are Senator Dybert. He represents Lawrence County. Senator Dybert does not, even though he is a Republican, he does not like to vote on anything that is good for the citizens of the state. Why he's a Republican, I don't know. I don't believe he is. Senator Melhoff, who represents Haken, Hughes, Hyde, Stanley, and Sully counties. Another one. Senator Crabtree. Oh, him and I have gone round and round via email. Represents Brookings, Kingsbury, Lake, Minor counties. And then Representative Mortensen. And he represents Haken, Hughes, Hyde, Stanley, and Sully counties. These individuals here guaranteed that if there's a vote that comes across that's good for the citizens of the state, they are not going to vote for it. And there are others out there too. They're not as bad, but as I started at the beginning of this, we have an overwhelming supermajority in numbers, but in numbers only. When you go through these bills, if you decide you want to go through these bills, you will see that a supermajority is not what we have. Anyway, I think that's it. I'm done. Thanks if you hung out with me this whole time. You're a brave person. I'm tired of talking, and I'm gonna leave it there. I wanted to point out these bills to you because it just tells you what kind of a legislative session we had. Um, when we vote for these people, we expect that I was naive in my younger days. When I vote for somebody, I expect them to go and take care of business just the way I want them to, the way I expect them to. And with these bills, we're finding out that's not happening. Anyway, that's it. Have a good day.